"Ma'am, you can scream all you want, but a locked gate isn't a felony," I said, watching Karen's face twist like she'd just discovered mold in her marble countertops. For a moment, everything froze: the dust in the air, the chirping cicadas, even the distant hum of the highway behind my 50 acres. Karen clutched the metal bars of my brand new gate as if she could channel pure suburban rage into bending steel. She was shaking, not with fear, but with pure HOA-fueled indignation. I could see her mind calculating which subsection of which bylaw she could weaponize. Behind her, 2 of her loyal board members lurked, clutching clipboards as if they were shields. And in that surreal moment, I realized this wasn't just a complaint. This was an opening shot. Now, if you're imagining a peaceful country property with a charming wood fence and a gentle breeze, let me correct the record. My place sat just outside the HOA boundary by a generous margin, far enough that I didn't owe them a dime, but close enough for them to see me as a rogue citizen. The boundary line might as well have been a demilitarized zone. I moved out here for space, quiet, and to escape the endless stream of pastel envelopes the HOA kept mailing to my old house. I never expected to trigger a full suburban uprising by installing a simple gate. The day started normally. I woke early, had coffee on the porch, and admired the sun stretching over the tree line. The smell of fresh cedar still lingered around the new post supports we'd sunk into the ground the day before. I was planning to run errands when I heard tires crunching on gravel, a sound that didn't belong. Nobody should have been coming from the old dirt path. It cut through my land like a scar, inherited from the previous owner who hadn't cared who used it, but I did, and the gate was my first step toward reclaiming the property. By the time I walked out to inspect the noise, Karen was already halfway up my drive, marching like she was leading a parade of righteousness. She didn't even greet me. She just pointed at the freshly installed gate and shouted, "This is a violation." I blinked at her. Of what exactly? She lifted her chin in that classic HOA president angle, the one that screams, "I rehearse speeches in the mirror." "Community access law," she snapped. "This road has been used for decades by residents. You can't just block us." I looked at the gate, at the land behind it, at Karen's perfectly gelled bob catching sunlight like a battle helmet. "Karen," I said, choosing my words like a bomb technician, "this isn't a community road. It's my driveway." "It was your driveway," she corrected, "until you decided to cause a public safety risk." One of her board members stepped forward. "We received several complaints," he added, nodding solemnly as if he were confirming an earthquake. "Complaints about me, securing my property." "Oh yes," Karen said. "A locked gate prevents through traffic. If someone needs to get to the east side of the subdivision quickly, they rely on this route." I felt my eyebrow twitch. "Karen, this property is not part of the HOA. You don't have jurisdiction here." Her mouth pinched. "We have community expectations." There it was, the unspoken constitution of every HOA rules, written in invisible ink, obeyed by guilt, gossip, and intimidation. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Look, I get that the shortcut is convenient, but it was never legal access. The county records show there's no easement here." Karen's eyes went wide, offended by reality itself. "That's impossible. Everyone knows this path is part of the neighborhood." "Everyone," I repeated, "except the county." That's when she dropped the threat that started this ridiculous war. She leaned in close and said, "If you don't remove that lock today, I'll escalate this to the county authorities myself." I almost laughed. "Please do." Her nostrils flared. A hawk screeched overhead, as if nature itself was mocking her. One of the board members scribbled on his clipboard aggressively, though I'm pretty sure he was just drawing squares. "You're making a mistake," Karen said. "People are upset. They're calling for an emergency meeting of an HOA I'm not part of." I asked. "Of the HOA," she corrected, as though that settled something cosmic. Before I could respond, a pickup truck I didn't recognize rolled up behind her. The driver leaned out his window. "Gates locked again," he said, like this was my routine criminal offense. "Karen, can you have it opened?" She turned to him with the authority of a sheriff in a Western. "I'm handling it." That was the moment the scale of the situation hit me. They'd been using my land as their personal throw road for years, maybe decades, not just a few neighbors, half the subdivision. And Karen wasn't mad about losing access, she was mad about losing power. I stepped closer to the gate, placed my hand on the cool metal, and said, "Nobody's going through here without my permission." "Period," Karen sputtered. "You're obstructing community travel." "No," I replied. "I'm enforcing property lines." The pickup driver sighed dramatically, as if I'd canceled his weekend. Karen crossed her arms. The cicadas buzzed louder. A storm cloud pressed low on the horizon. Then she smiled a slow, ominous smile that told me she had a plan. "Fine," she said, "have it your way. But when the county gets involved, don't pretend you weren't warned." She turned on her heel and marched back toward her car, barking orders at her board members. The pickup followed, kicking up dust as they retreated. I stood there, staring after them, heart thudding with the strange adrenaline that comes from standing your ground. Something told me this wasn't over. Far from it. And as I looked at the locked gate glinting in the afternoon sun, I had no idea just how far Karen was willing to go or how messy this was about to become. "Point of order," I said, rising from my folding chair. "You can't vote to control land you don't own." Karen's gavel hit the table so hard the room jumped. "Sit down," she hissed, as if she were the final boss of parliamentary procedure. Even if you've never stepped foot in an HOA meeting, imagine a cafeteria that smells faintly of disinfectant and burnt coffee, filled with people who'd rather be anywhere else. That was the scene I walked into. Half the residents blinked at me like they weren't sure why they'd been summoned on a Tuesday night. The other half clung to every word Karen said as though her binder of bylaws contained sacred scripture. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, giving everything a strange courtroom glare. And right there at the center, bathed in that flickering glow, sat Karen ready to wage political war over my locked gate. If she'd had a podium, she would have used it. She opened the meeting by slamming the gavel as if she were calling Congress into emergency session. "This," she announced, voice trembling with passion or caffeine, "is a matter of community safety." She gestured toward the printed photo of my locked gate projected on the wall. Zoomed in so close you could count the screws in the crossbeam. "This obstruction," she continued, "is endangering residents." I raised a hand. "How?" "We'll get to you," she snapped, with the pleasantness of a malfunctioning vending machine. Then she turned back to the room. "For years, we've relied on that access road for emergencies, commutes, and neighborhood continuity." A man near the back whispered, "That's not an emergency road," but his wife elbowed him silent. Karen's inner circle nodded in synchronized agreement, their matching clipboards held like shields. One of them, a woman named Felicia, who always smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, leaned into her microphone. "We've received complaints from residents who were late to work, late to appointments, and late to picking up children because of this closure." I couldn't help myself. "You mean because you've been cutting across my property?" Dozens of heads swiveled toward me. Someone actually gasped, like I'd just accused the HOA president of treason. Karen didn't flinch, but her jaw tightened. Access was customary, she said, and customary access can be recognized under community standards. Community standards aren't legally binding, I replied, or applicable outside the HOA boundary. There was a ripple of murmurs. A few people looked confused, checking their agenda packets as if a map would magically appear inside. Karen shot me a smile that could sharpen pencils. Thank you for your comments. Now, as I was saying, we need a motion to open a discussion on creating a resolution to restore access. A man in a plaid shirt raised his hand slowly. But doesn't the land belong to him? Even if we pass something, doesn't it, not matter? Karen fired back so fast he practically recoiled. It matters symbolically. Then, catching herself, she added, and procedurally. That was when I realized she was sweating. Not enough for the whole room to notice, but enough for me to see the faint shine along her temples. Karen was losing control of the narrative. If you've ever dealt with an HOA president whose identity is fused with her title, you know that's dangerous territory. She clicked to the next slide on her presentation, an outdated map that mislabeled the property lines. Mine conveniently showed a dotted path labeled HOA through OOT. I felt my jaw drop. That map is wrong, I said, stepping forward. It was corrected by the county 3 years ago. That route was a private dirt path the previous owner allowed people to use informally. Karen cleared her throat loudly. He's misinformed. Multiple residents can attest to decades of use. I stared at her. Yeah, because you were using it as your personal shortcut. Every morning, a collective inhale swept through the room. Someone muttered, "I knew it," while another whispered, "So that's why she always beats traffic." Karen slammed the gavel again. Irrelevant. The point is, we need a rule mandating the gate remain unlocked. My heart pounded. Karen, you don't have authority over me or my land. I'm not in your HOA. You can't pass a rule that controls my property. The treasurer, a tired-looking man who'd clearly been dragged into the meeting against his will, raised his hand. Actually, she's right. He flipped through a binder. We have no jurisdiction outside our boundary. It was the first time all night someone on the board had contradicted her. Karen's head turned toward him with the slow precision of a predatory bird. "Treasurer Mills," she said, "perhaps you've misread the bylaws." He shook his head. "No, I wrote that section." A few chuckles bubbled from the back row. Karen's glare silenced them instantly. She took a deep breath, regained her posture, and said, "Regardless of jurisdiction, we can set expectations. And if expectations are not met, we can appeal to the county. They care about public safety." I stepped forward again. "Great, bring in the county. Let them look at the same records I did." I could feel the room shifting. People were no longer nodding automatically. They were listening. Karen saw it too. Her cheeks flushed. "We are voting," she declared, "right now. All in favor of the motion to petition for mandatory access? Raise your hand." A few hands lifted, including the loyal clipboard brigade, but most people hesitated. Some looked uncomfortable. Some looked downright annoyed that their Tuesday evening had turned into a hostile land debate. One woman muttered, "Why are we even here? It's his land." Karen banged the gavel again, louder. "Hands up now." Before more hands could rise, the cafeteria doors opened. A man in a county polo stepped inside, holding a folder and scanning the room. Conversations froze. Karen's face went pale. He cleared his throat. Excuse me, I'm looking for the HOA president. His eyes drifted to Karen. I have the preliminary review on the access. Complaint you filed. The entire room locked onto the two of them. Karen swallowed. We're in the middle of a meeting. He nodded politely. This won't wait. She looked at me. I looked at her. And just like that, the balance of power shifted. The county was involved, and whatever was in that folder was about to blow this whole thing wide open. You can stop digging for a loophole, the county officer said calmly. There is no easement. There never was. Karen let out a sound somewhere between a gasp and a shriek, clutching her binder as if it had betrayed her. If you've ever watched someone's entire narrative collapse in real time, you know the tension that filled the air. The sun beat down on the metal gate, making it shimmer like some sacred artifact of suburban rebellion. A light breeze carried the dusty smell of the gravel road and the faint scent of pines from the tree line behind me. Karen hovered so close to the officer that her perfume overly floral and alarmingly strong seemed to fog the air. Her board members stood a safe distance behind her, silently recalculating their loyalties. The officer flipped another page in his folder, with the deliberate calm of a man who had seen too many neighborhood feuds. And for the first time since this whole fiasco began, I felt the balance shift in my direction. The morning had started with a voicemail from the county land use department, letting me know they'd be sending someone to inspect the access obstruction complaint. I figured it would be quick and uneventful. What I didn't know was that Karen had arranged her own entourage to greet the officer as if she were hosting a diplomatic summit. By the time I arrived at the gate, she'd set up a collapsible table stacked with maps, highlighted copies of irrelevant statutes, and something that appeared to be a poster board presentation titled Community Emotional Access. "Good morning," the officer said when I walked up, adjusting his sunglasses. "I'm Officer Halpern. Just here to clarify the boundary situation." Karen cut in before I could speak, and to verify that he is illegally blocking a vital community passage. Halpern blinked slowly. "I'm here to review property lines." She thrust a printed photo toward him. "This shows the path residents have depended on for decades." He glanced at it. "I see tire tracks on private land." I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from smiling. The heat radiated off the metal gate, while Halpern crouched to inspect the hinges and lock, his boots crunching on the gravel. Karen hovered inches behind him, flapping her papers like a frantic bird. "Officer," she said, "you must understand this road is emotionally public. Residents feel connected to it. They rely on it for their sense of community." He stood up slowly. "Ma'am, emotional use is not a legal designation." Her face flushed an alarming shade of red. "Then there should be one." I stepped forward. "Officer, I bought this property last year. The deed and parcel maps clearly show no recorded right-of-way. The previous owner just didn't enforce boundaries." Halpern nodded. "Yes, we reviewed those documents. That's why I'm here." He opened his folder and revealed a printed map stamped with the county seal. Parcel 1 for B single-owner access. "No easements noted." One of Karen's board members shifted nervously. The other stared at the ground as though he wished it would open and swallow him. Karen wasn't done. "But people have been driving through here for years." Halpern gave a sympathetic shrug. "Customary use isn't the same as legal access. If there was no recorded easement, it's up to the property owner." "Which is me," I added. Her head snapped toward me. "You don't understand the community impact." I considered that. "Actually, I understand it perfectly. You took a private shortcut and called it a community need. A few of the neighbors, standing at the edge of the scene, exchanged looks. One whispered, "I told you she didn't have permission," to another, who nodded with the resigned guilt of someone caught trespassing. Karen's voice rose. "Officer, this sets a dangerous precedent. What if he locks this gate and someone needs to get to the subdivision quickly? What if there's an emergency?" Halpern flipped to another page. "Emergency vehicles must use public roads. County protocol forbids them from using unmaintained private driveways." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. The buzzing cicadas filled the silence. The officer took a step back from the gate. Based on this review, the property owner is fully within his rights to install and lock this gate. The county has no authority to compel him to provide access. I watched the words hit her like a slow-moving freight train. Her hand went slack, and her binder slipped from her grip, thudding onto the dry dirt. Papers scattered like startled birds. "This isn't over," she whispered, voice trembling. I met her gaze. "I think it is." Halpern gave a courteous nod and began walking back to his truck. A couple of neighbors drifted away, murmuring under their breath. The board members abandoned Kieran entirely, retreating to the safety of their golf carts. But she didn't move. She stared at the gate, breathing hard, her mind churning like a storm front building pressure. Then she lifted her chin. "If the county won't handle it," she said softly, "there are other ways." I felt the hairs on my arms rise. "What does that mean?" She didn't answer. She just turned, gathered her scattered papers with shaking hands, and marched toward her car. Her tires hissed anger. Dust rose. I knew Karen was planning something loud, petty, and dangerous.